Hello and welcome back. My name is Nicholas Nikolak, and you are listening to the Android Book Tutorials. These tutorials are based on the Creative Commons work of Mark Murphy, who kindly releases versions of his book, The Busy Coder's Guide to Android Development, and as such, the video is released Creative Commons as well. I'll read from the book and go through the points directly. You might be warned that at this time I cover only up to Android 4.4, whereas the original subscription book is updated on a quarterly basis and covers Android 6 and beyond. For completely current versions of Android, please purchase a subscription to Murphy's book at commonsware.com. The theory of widgets. There's a decent chance that you already have done work with widget-based UI frameworks. In that case, much of this chapter will be review, though checking out the section on the absolute positioning anti-pattern should certainly be worthwhile. There's a chance, though, that your UI background comes from places where you have not been using a traditional widget framework, where either you have been doing all the drawing yourself, for instance, game frameworks, or where the UI is defined more in the form of a document, for instance, classic web development. This chapter is aimed at you, to give you some idea of what we're talking about when discussing the notions of widgets and containers. What are widgets? Wikipedia has a nice definition of a widget. In computer programming, a widget or control is an element of a graphical user interface, GUI, that displays an information arrangement changeable by the user, such as a window or text box. The defining characteristic of a widget is to provide a single interaction point for the direct manipulation of a given kind of data. In other words, widgets are basic vital visual building blocks which, combined in an application, hold all the data processed by an application and the available interaction on this data. Take, for example, this Android screen. Ignoring the gray horizontal bars at the top of the screen, we see an icon of contact Rolodex card, some text, phone only unsynced, a thin horizontal divider line, another icon showing a placeholder for a contact photo in a frame, two data entry fields, an icon that looks like a downward pointing arrow in a circle, another thin horizontal divider line, another piece of text, two more icons that look like a plus and minus sign in circles, a button, a data entry field, two more buttons, done and revert, in some sort of bar across the bottom. Everything listed above is a widget. The user interface for most Android screens activities is made up of one or more widgets. This does not mean that you cannot do your own drawing. In fact, all the existing widgets are implemented via low-level drawing routines, which you can use for everything from your own custom widgets to games. This also does not mean you cannot use web technologies. In fact, we will see later in the book a widget designed to allow you to embed web content into an Android activity. However, for most non-game applications, your Android user interface will be made up of several widgets. Size, margins, padding. Widgets have some sort of size. Since a 0 pixel high, 0 pixel wide widget is not especially user-friendly, sometimes that size will be dictated by what is inside the widget itself, such as a label, having a size dictated by the text in the label. Sometimes that size will be dictated by the size of whatever holds the widget, a container, described in the next section, where the widget wants to take up all the remaining width and or height. Sometimes that size will be a specific set of dimensions. Widgets can have margins. As with CSS, margins provide separation between a widget and anything adjacent to it. Other widgets, edges of the screen. Margins are really designed to help prevent widgets from running right up next to each other. Right up next to each other. So they are visually distinct. Some developers, however, try to use margins as a way to hack absolute positioning into Android, which is an anti-pattern that we will examine later in this chapter. Widgets can have padding. As with CSS, padding provides separation between the content of a widget and the widget's edges. This is mostly used with the widgets that have some sort of background, like a button, so that the content of a widget, for instance the widget caption, does not run right to the edges of the button, once again for visual distinction. What are containers? Containers are ways of organizing multiple widgets into some sort of structure. Widgets do not normally line themselves up in a specific pattern. We have to define that pattern ourselves. In most GUI toolkits, a container is deemed to have a set of children. Those children are widgets, or sometimes other containers. Each container has a basic rule for how it lays out its children on the screen, possibly customized by request from the children themselves. Common container patterns include put all children in a row, one after the next, put all children in a column, one below the next, arrange the children to a table or grid with some number of rows and columns, anchor the children to the sides of the container according to requests made by those children, anchor the children to the other children in the container according to the requests made by those children, stack all children, one on top of the next, and so on. In the same activity above, the dominant pattern is a column, with things laid out from top to bottom. Some of those things are rows, with the content laid out left to right. However, as it turns out, the area with the most of those widgets is scrollable. As you can see a thin scroll bar, on the right side of the screen, the Done and Revert buttons. Hold for just a moment.